What kind of father are you? You can't even afford a house. My daughter, Emily, laughed and her husband, Trevor, snorted mockingly as he poured himself more wine. Everyone at the table fell silent, but I just smiled. Their words cut like a knife because I had given everything so that they could live in prosperity. I left the restaurant in silence, but I had a plan in mind. 2 months later I returned as the owner of their building. The rent had tripled. They thought they had destroyed me, but they were wrong. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The restaurant hummed with the clatter of plates and the murmur of voices, but the air at our table was thick like a storm about to break. The soft glow of pendant lamps cast shadows on the white tablecloth and the scent of grilled steak lingered though my plate sat untouched across from me. Emily leaned forward, her designer dress catching the light, her manicured nails tapping the stem of her wine glass. Trevor, her husband, lounged beside her, his expensive blazer unbuttoned, a smirk playing on his lips as he swirled his Merlot. "You're not eating, Dad," Emily said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What's wrong?" "Can't afford the menu." The table filled with cousins, an aunt and a few of Trevor's business friends went quiet. Someone coughed, a fork scraped a plate. Trevor snorted loud and deliberate, pouring himself more wine. "Maybe we should have picked a cheaper place." For Will's sake." I felt the words like a slap, but I didn't flinch. My hands rested on the table, the fork in my right hand, cool against my palm. I squeezed it just enough to feel the metal bite. Emily's eyes, so like her mother's, gleamed with something cruel. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You've never been a real father. You know that. Just a burden, always scraping by, always embarrassing us." The room seemed to shrink, the clink of glasses faded and all I could hear was my own pulse. Trevor chuckled, muttering to the guy next to him. "Poor old Will. Maybe a shelter's more his speed." A few nervous laughs rippled around the table, but no one met my eyes. I could have shouted, could have told them how I'd paid for Emily's college, her wedding, their damn apartment, how I'd given up my own dreams so they could play at being successful. But I didn't. I smiled. A tight, controlled curve of my lips that felt more like a blade than a gesture you done. I asked, my voice low, steady. Emily rolled her eyes, tossing her hair. "Oh, please don't make a scene." Trevor raised his glass, mocking a toast to Will, the king of nothing. "Sit down, don't ruin the night." My chair scraped against the hardwood floor. As I stood, the sound cut through the chatter. My old sweater felt heavy, the weight of their stares heavier. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair, the fabric, brushing my knuckles like a reminder of who I was. Not this, not their punching bag. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, my eyes locking with Emily's for a moment. Hers were defiant, unyielding. Trevor just laughed already, turning to charm the guest beside him. I walked out. My steps measured the restaurant's warmth, giving way to the bite of the October night. The door swung shut behind me, muffling their voices. My breath clouded in the air and the street lights flickered, casting long shadows on the wet pavement. Their words echoed in my head, each one a spark igniting something I'd buried for years. I didn't look back. My hands slipped into my pocket fingers, brushing my phone. A plan was forming, hazy but sharp at the edges, like a blade being honed. They thought they knew me, thought they'd broken me. They didn't know a damn thing. The streets of Columbus were quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. My shoes crunched on stray leaves and the cold stung my face, but I barely noticed. A street lamp's glow caught a puddle and I stopped. My reflection warped in the water. My phone was in my hand before I realized it. The screen lighting up with a photo of Emily, 6 years old, gap-toothed, holding a daisy. My thumb hovered over the image and the memories came rushing back. Uninvited 20 years ago, I'd sat in a bank, the air thick, with the smell of ink and paper. The loan officer's pen scratched as I signed for Emily's college fund. My tie was too tight. My shoulders ached from a double shift, but I'd smiled. She'd be the first in our family with a degree. I saw her future bright, boundless. I didn't see the cost to mine. The memory shifted 10 years back. Emily's wedding. The venue was a blur of white flowers and clinking glasses. She'd glowed in her dress, a vision I'd paid for by emptying my savings. I'd wanted to travel, see the Rockies, maybe, but that dream dissolved in the rustle of her veil. She hugged me that day. Her perfume sharp and sweet. "You're the best dad," she'd said. I believed her. 5 years ago. Trevor's Cafe. The place smelled of fresh coffee and ambition. He'd shake in my hand, his grip too tight, his promises too slick. "This will change everything, you'll see." I'd handed over the last of my retirement fund to help him start it. He'd called it a loan, never mentioned it again. I blinked and the street came back into focus. My house was just ahead, a squat, shingled thing in a row of similar homes. The porch light flickered as I climbed the steps, the key cold in my hand. Inside the air was stale, the couch creaking under my weight. A photo of Emily sat on the shelf, her smile frozen in time. Next to it a stack of old papers, bills, receipts, reminders of what I'd given up. I pulled a yellow check from the pile. The ink faded, but legible. Payment for Emily's tuition, written in my careful scroll. My fingers tightened around it, the edges crumpling. She'd stopped calling, after the wedding, a card at Christmas. Maybe Trevor's Cafe thrived, but my name was never on the lease, never in the story they told. The kitchen clock ticked each second louder than the last. I set the check down, my hand steady. Now the pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but something else was growing, something hard, unyielding. I looked at Emily's photo again. Her eyes bright, with a future I'd built. My own eyes were different. Now, colder, I wasn't their fool anymore. Tomorrow things would change. Morning light sliced through the blinds of my office, a cramped room that smelled of coffee and dust. Papers were strewn across the desk, old contracts, invoices, a life in receipts. I sat with a mug of black coffee. The steam curling upward. My notebook opened to a fresh page. 2 names stared back at me, Emily, Trevor. My pen hovered, then pressed hard ink, bleeding into the paper. I wasn't broke, not yet. Years as a construction manager had left me with enough a modest savings, a few contacts who still owed favors. But I'd lived lean, pouring everything into them, Emily's education, Trevor's business, their apartment. My fingers tightened around the mug, the heat grounding me, no more. The phone rang once before Frank picked up his voice. "Grawly from years of cigars will help." "It's early, you okay? I need advice," I said, leaning back in my chair. The springs groaned about Trevor's business. A pause. "You sure about this? Stirring up trouble with your daughter's husband? That's a deep cut." "They stirred first." My voice was flat, but my pulse quickened. "What do you know about his cafes?" Frank sighed. "He's leveraged to the hilt. Loans, bad deals, word is, he's missed payments." "You thinking what I think you are?" Maybe I jotted a note. "Debts lenders, who's he owe?" "Start with Midland Bank guy. Their Tom Ree might talk, but will?" This could burn bridges with Emily too. Let it burn. I hung up my eyes on the notebook. The plan was taking shape, rough but real. I opened my laptop. The screen's glow harsh in the dim room. Emily's social media was a parade of excess vacations, designer bags, captions about living the dream. Trevor's posts were worse. Him in a tailored suit, toasting at his latest cafe opening. I scrolled my jaw tight. They'd built their empire on my sacrifices. Then laughed in my face. A call to an old client confirmed what Frank hinted. Trevor's cafes were bleeding cash. One bad month could sink him. I wrote another note by the debt. Risky but possible. I still had enough pull to make it work. The office felt smaller. Now, the walls closing in with possibility. I stood pacing, the floorboards creaking under my boots. My sleeves were rolled up, my coffee cold. Each step felt like a decision. Each note a weapon. They'd underestimated me, thought I'd fade quietly. I grabbed my coat and the notebook, its pages heavy, with intent. The bank was a short drive away and Tom owed me a favor. I stepped outside the morning air sharp, the city waking around me. My strides were long, purposeful. I knew where to hit them and I wasn't waiting. I stepped onto the sidewalk. My notebook tucked in my coat pocket. Each page a weapon waiting to be drawn. The Columbus wind bit at my knuckles, carrying the scent of rain and exhaust. The bank was 10 blocks away, its glass facade glinting in the gray morning light. My strides were steady, my pulse even steadier. For the first time in years I felt alive. Inside the bank smelled of polished wood and money, the hum of a printer blended with the soft clack of keyboards. Janet, an old colleague from my construction days, sat behind a desk. Her glasses perched low. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes narrowed, sensing purpose. "Will Cunningham," she said, leaning back. "What brings you here?" "Information," I said, sliding into the chair opposite her. My voice was calm, but my fingers tapped the notebook in my pocket. "About Trevor Jones, his cafes." Janet raised an eyebrow, then glanced at her screen. "You're not one for small talk anymore, are you?" She typed her nails, clicking Trevor's in deep. 3 of his cafes are behind on payments. Midland's ready to call in the loans. She paused, meeting my gaze. "And Emily, she's got her own mess, took a loan for that online boutique of hers barely covering interest." I nodded, jotting a note. "Debts, vulnerable. How bad is it?" "Bad enough," Janet said. "Trevor's juggling creditors like a circus act. Emily's worse. She's burning cash on inventory. She can't move." She leaned closer, voice low. "Why the interest? Will this about family?" I smiled thin and sharp. "Just curious, thanks, Janet." I stood my chair scraping softly. She didn't press, but her eyes followed me out. Next stop Trevor's flagship cafe, a sleek spot downtown. I pushed through the door, the bell jangling. The air smelled of burnt coffee and neglect. Half the tables were empty, the staff listless. A cracked sign above the counter read, "Jones Java." Trevor was in the back. His voice sharp as he argued on the phone. "You can't cut me off now, I'll have the money." His shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. I ordered a coffee, paid in cash and sat near the window unnoticed. The cup was cold by the time I left, but my notebook was heavier. Empty seats, angry suppliers. Back home, the glow of my laptop lit the dim kitchen. Emily's social media was a gallery of excess. Her in a silk scarf on a yacht, a new leather bag slung over her shoulder. The captions screamed success, but the comments told another story. "Where's my order?" 3 weeks late, her boutique was crumbling under complaints. I wrote, "Vanity, her weakness." The clock ticked past midnight. My coffee long gone, cold. I leaned back, the chair creaking. Their pride was my opening, their debts, my leverage. I pulled out my phone and dialed an old partner, a man who knew how to move money quietly. The line rang as rain began to patter against the window. Each drop a promise of what was coming. I signed the papers and Trevor's debts became mine. The investor's office was all glass and steel, the air heavy, with the scent of leather and ink. My pen moved smoothly each stroke, a step toward their unraveling. The investor, a bald man named Kessler, slid the contract back across the desk. "Done," he said. His voice clipped. "You sure about this, Cunningham? It's a risky play." I met his gaze, my expression unyielding. "It's just the start." I folded the agreement, tucking it into my coat. The city sprawled below Columbus's skyline, sharp against the dusk. I left without another word. The move was clean, hidden behind a shell company I'd set up with Kessler's help. Trevor wouldn't see my name, only the letter that arrived the next day, payment due 30 days. I imagined him opening it, his hands shaking, his charm useless against black ink. By noon I was parked across from his cafe, the same one I'd scouted before. A technical difficulties sign hung crookedly on the door. Through the window I saw Trevor pacing, yelling into his phone. A delivery truck pulled away empty. I allowed myself a small smile at home. I spread the documents across my kitchen table, the lamp casting a harsh glow. The numbers were clear. Trevor's cafe was bleeding and my purchase of his debt gave me the res. I demanded immediate repayment, knowing he couldn't deliver the letter now in his hands was my first move. A quiet, precise cut. I leaned back the chair, groaning under my weight. Emily's face flashed in my mind. Her smile from that old photo in my drawer. Was I going too far? She'd stood by. Trevor laughed as they humiliated me, but she was still my daughter. The thought lingered heavy until I pushed it aside. This wasn't about her, not yet, it was about justice. The phone rang, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. I picked up, my voice steady. "Yes, it's Jones." Trevor snapped his words, rushed this creditor nonsense. "Who's behind it? You know something, don't you, Will?" His panic was almost sweet, a crack in his polished facade. I leaned against the counter. "The letter, still in my hand, sounds like you're in trouble, Trevor. Maybe you should have been more careful." I let the words hang. My tone calm, almost amused. He cursed, demanding answers, but I hung up, my pulse steady. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the drip of the faucet. I set the letter down, its edges crisp, and felt the weight of what I'd started. I set the phone down, Trevor's voice still echoing in my ears, frantic, cracking under pressure. The apartment was quiet, the creak of the floorboards loud. In the stillness, my hand lingered on the receiver, the plastic cool against my palm. Then came the knock, sharp, insistent. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Emily stormed in her designer coat, flapping like a flag of war. Trevor followed, his jaw tight, reeking of cigarettes and desperation. The air shifted heavy with their anger. Emily's eyes were red. Her voice ablaze. "You're pathetic, Dad, stirring up trouble because you're jealous of us. You think you can ruin our lives." I stood by the table, hands in my pockets, my face a mask. "I haven't done anything," I said. "My tone even sounds like you're digging your own graves." Trevor paced, his fists clenched, his blazer wrinkled. "Don't play innocent, old man," he growled. "You've been whining to someone. Banks, creditors, who knows? You're trying to sink me." His voice broke, betraying the fear. Beneath his bravado, Emily spun toward me, her heels clicking on the wood. "You've always hated our success." She spat, "living in this dump, clinging to your sad little life. You're nothing and you can't stand that. We're everything you'll never be." Her words cut, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse in that restaurant. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. "You built your lives on my back," I said, my voice low, steady. "And now you're surprised, the ground shaking." Emily laughed, sharp and bitter, tossing her purse onto the couch. "You're delusional. Keep your conspiracies, Dad, you'll regret this." She turned to Trevor, who slammed his hand against the wall. The sound sharp in the small room. "Back off, Will," he said, pointing a trembling finger. "Or you'll wish you had." His threat was hollow and we both knew it. I didn't move, didn't blink. "Careful, Trevor, you're not in control anymore." The words landed like stones and his face twitched. Emily grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. She paused, glaring back at me, then slammed the door shut. The frame rattled, the sound lingering like a warning. Alone. I exhaled, my heart steady, but my mind racing. Their fear was real. Now, their cracks exposed, I crossed to the table and opened my notebook. The pages worn from use. My pen scratched as I wrote each word a step deeper into the plan. Outside, the city lights flickered through the window, pulsing like a heartbeat. I glanced at them, my reflection faint in the glass, and turned back to the page. The city lights pulsed through my window, their glow fractured by streaks of rain. I sat at my kitchen table, the notebook open, its pages scarred with ink. My pencil scratched each line, a piece of the plan that would unravel their world. Emily's words from earlier. Her venom, Trevor's threats echoed, but they only sharpened my focus. This wasn't anger, it was precision. I picked up the phone, dialing Ron, an old partner who'd navigated more real estate deals than I'd had years. His voice crackled through. Gruff and wary. "Will, it's late. What's this about a building?" I said, my tone steady, "The one at 14th and High. I want it quietly, through a shell company." A long pause. "That's a big ask, expensive too. You sure you've got the capital?" "Make it happen." I said, "I'll cover it." I didn't elaborate. Ron didn't need to know the why, only the how. "All right," he said. "Finally, but this better not blow up in your face." The line went dead and I set the phone down, my fingers brushing the notebook. The address stared back. Their building, their sanctuary. The next morning I met a lawyer named Carla in a cafe downtown. The place buzzed with the hiss of espresso machines and the clatter of cups. Papers spread across the table, their edges crisp under the cold light streaming through the window. Carla's pen hovered as she studied me, her eyes sharp. "This is an unusual request, Mr. Cunningham. A shell company for a single property." "Discretion matters," I said, sliding a folder toward her. "Can you handle it?" She nodded, flipping through the documents. "It's doable, but why the rush?" Her tone was professional, but curiosity flickered. I leaned back the chair, creaking timings, everything. She didn't press and I didn't offer more. By the time I left, the deal was in motion. The papers signed my signature. A quiet vow. That evening I walked to their building, a sleek tower of glass and steel in the heart of Columbus. The lobby gleamed, but a crack snaked across one wall, a flaw they'd never notice. I told the doorman I was checking utilities, an old trick from my construction days. He waved me through. From the street I caught a glimpse of their apartment, third-floor corner unit. Emily's silhouette moved behind the curtain. Her gesture sharp. Arguing with Trevor. I turned away, my breath visible in the chilly air. Back home I paused at the shelf, Emily's old photo catching the lamplight, her 6-year-old smile, all trust and daisies. My chest tightened. Was this too far? She'd laughed as they tore me down, but she was still my daughter. I set the photo face down, the ache fading under the weight of what they'd done. The notebook weighted its pages, a map to their ruin. I opened it, writing, "Their home, my leverage." The phone buzzed, a text from Carla, "Deals moving, papers ready soon." I stood at the window, the city sprawling below, and saw another message, Emily's name on the screen. My thumb hovered, but I didn't open it. Not yet. I slid the phone into my pocket. Emily's message unread, its weight, a spark in my chest. She was rattled and I knew why. The letter about the rent tripled overnight had landed. I stepped out, the November air sharp, and headed to Trevor's cafe. Not to enter, just to watch. The plan was moving and I wanted to see the crack spread. The cafe was a ghost of itself. Its windows dark. A closed sign taped crookedly to the door. I leaned against a street lamp, the metal cold through my coat. Across the street, their apartment building loomed, its lights winking like eyes. I'd hired a marketer days ago, a quiet deal to boost a rival boutique online. Emily's store was bleeding customers. Her social media flooded with complaints, late orders, no refunds. Her empire of silk and selfies was crumbling inside their apartment. Chaos reigned. I couldn't hear them, but I saw it through the window. Emily, pacing her blouse, untucked, her hands flailing. Trevor slumped on the couch, a cigarette burning in his hand. A letter torn in half lay on the coffee table. The rent increase had hit them like a fist. Emily's phone sailed across the room, shattering against the wall. I exhaled my breath, clouding the air. Her control was slipping. Just as I'd planned. Earlier, I'd checked her social media. Her latest post, a posed shot with a designer scarf, had 50 comments. All venom. "Where's my dress, scammer?" I'd smiled then, the same way I did now. The marketer's ads were relentless, pushing her rival's sleek website to every corner of Columbus. Emily's vanity had built her brand and now it was her noose. I walked home, the city quiet, except for the crunch of leaves under my boots. In my kitchen, the lamp flickered as I sat the table cluttered with notes. I pulled Emily's photo from the drawer. Her young face, a ghost of who she'd been. Guilt pricked me. She was drowning and I'd poured the water. But then I remembered her laugh in that restaurant. The way she'd called me nothing. The guilt faded, replaced by something colder. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Trevor's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice. Then answered my voice smooth, "What is it?" "We need to talk," he said. His words slurred, desperate. "Tomorrow your place, name the time." He was breaking and he didn't even know. I held the hammer. I leaned back the chair, creaking. 8. Don't be late. I hung up the thunder outside, rolling like a warning. The storm was coming and they were caught in its path. I hung up Trevor's pleas, still ringing, his voice raw with panic. He wanted a meeting, thought I could sway the creditors. He didn't know I controlled. I smiled cold and sharp and grabbed my coat. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy. The streets slick under the Columbus skyline. I knew where he'd be drowning, his failures in a bar. But first we'd meet at his cafe, the heart of his crumbling empire. The cafe was a shell. Its tables bare, the air thick with the scent of bleach and defeat. Trevor sat at the counter. His blazer crumpled, a stack of unpaid bills beside him. The keys to the place glinted under the fluorescent light, a symbol of what he'd lost. He looked up as I entered, his eyes bloodshot. "Will," he said, standing, his voice unsteady. "You got to help me. Talk to these people. Tell him I'm good for it." I crossed my arms, leaning against a table. "You dug this hole, Trevor, not me." My words were ice, each one deliberate. "Why should I clean up your mess?" He slammed a fist on the counter, the keys rattling. "Because your family, you owe us." His desperation was pathetic. His charm gone. I didn't flinch. "You owe me," I said, my voice low. "Everything you have, your cafes, your life, it's built on what I gave you." I stepped closer, my shadow falling over him, "And you threw it in my face." He opened his mouth then closed it, his hands shaking. The door swung open, a supplier hauling out the last espresso machine. Trevor didn't look, but his shoulders slumped. "Just talk to them," he muttered, tossing the keys onto the counter. They landed with a clink, a surrender. I left without a word, the cafe's emptiness echoing behind me. Later I found him in a dive bar, the air thick, with stale beer and regret. He was hunched over a whiskey, ranting to the bartender, "It's not my fault." He slurred, not seeing me in the corner. "They're out to get me." I sipped my coffee unnoticed and watched him unravel. At home, Ron called his voice brisk. "The building's nearly yours, Will. Papers are finalizing." I nodded, though he couldn't see my eyes on the notebook. The plan was almost complete. I spread the documents across the table. Their weight a promise. Trevor's cafes were gone. Emily's store was failing and soon their home would be mine. The mailbox clattered outside. I retrieved a thick envelope, the lawyer's seal crisp under my fingers. I tore it open. The words clear, "Property transfer complete." Lightning flashed illuminating the room and I set the letter down, its edges sharp. Tomorrow they'd face the truth. I folded the lawyer's letter. Its words, "Property transfer complete." Heavy in my hands, lightning cracked outside, splitting the Columbus sky, but I felt steady-rooted. My coat was damp from the storm. As I left my apartment, the documents tucked inside each page. A blade honed for this moment. Their building waited, a tower of glass and lies, and I was ready to bring it down. The elevator hummed as I rode to their floor, the mirror reflecting my face calm, unyielding. Their door was ajar, voices spilling out, sharp and frantic. I knocked once hard. The voices stopped. Trevor yanked the door open. His shirt untucked, eyes wild. "Will," he said, his voice breaking. "What the hell are you doing here?" I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The apartment was a wreck. Boxes, half-packed wine glasses scattered, a torn notice about the tripled rent pinned to a newspaper. Emily stood by the window. Her hair a mess, her silk blouse stained with tears. "Dad," she whispered, her voice, small like a child's. I set the documents on the coffee table, the thud loud in the silence. "Read," I said, my tone flat. Emily reached for them, her hands trembling and her eyes widened as she scanned the pages. Trevor leaned over, his breath ragged and his face drained of color. You own the building." Emily's voice cracked, her gaze darting to me. "This is a mistake." "It has to be no mistake," I said, crossing my arms. "I bought it. Your rent's due, all of it." Now, Trevor lunged forward, his fists clenched. "You can't do this. We'll fight it. You hear me?" But his voice faltered, his bravado crumbling like ash. He knew he had nothing left, no cafes, no leverage, no charm. To save him, Emily sank onto the couch, sobbing. "Dad, please," she said. Her words choked. "I didn't mean it. Those things I said at the restaurant, remember when you taught me to ride a bike? You were my hero." Her tears fell, but they didn't reach me. "Not anymore. You called me nothing," I said, my voice low, steady. "You both did. You built your lives on what I gave you, then spat in my face. This," I gestured to the documents, "is what you chose." Trevor grabbed my arm, his grip weak. "We'll fix, it will give us time, we'll pay you back." I swear his eyes begged, but I saw the man who'd mocked me, who'd laughed as I bled. I pulled free, stepping back. "You're out of time." I turned to the door there. Please following me like echoes in the elevator. The walls closed in and for a moment doubt flickered Emily's tears, her voice calling me Dad. I pressed it down, my jaw tight. They'd made their bed outside. The wind howled. Tugging at my coat, I pulled out my phone, typing a note, fun for the overlooked. The idea had been growing a way to help those like me who'd given everything and gotten scorn. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, my steps firm on the wet pavement, and headed into the night. I sank into the chair at my kitchen table, the scent of fresh coffee curling from the mug in my hands. The storm had passed, leaving a quiet that settled deep in my bones. For the first time in years, I felt still, like a river finally finding its course. My notebook lay open and I wrote, "Fund for the sacrificed, for those who gave all and were forgotten." The words felt right, a purpose born from pain. I dialed Frank, his familiar rasp, answering on the second ring. "Will you sound different? What's going on?" "I did it," I said, leaning back the chair, creaking. "They're done and I'm starting something new, a fund for people like me, people who gave everything and got nothing but grief." Frank let out a low whistle. "Hell, you don't mess around. You really pulled it off. After all, they put you through." His voice held awe and it warmed me like sunlight after a long winter. "Had to," I said, "for me. For others, we talked details, structure, goals, and by the time I hung up, the idea was solid, a beacon in the fog of what I'd done." The next day I walked to a small office I'd rented downtown, its windows bright with morning light. The air smelled of fresh paper and possibility. A consultant, Sarah, sat across from me, her laptop open. "Your fund's viable," she said, sliding a budget across the desk. "We can launch in a month if you keep the momentum." I nodded, signing the first forms, my pen steady. "Let's make it happen." The act felt like planting a seed, one that would grow beyond me. As I left, a memory surfaced years ago, standing in a bank signing away my savings for Emily's wedding. I dreamed of the Rockies, then of open skies and freedom. I'd let that dream go for her. Now I was free. The weight of her betrayal lifted. The contrast sharpened my resolve. That evening I wandered through a park near my house. The air crisp, the leaves crunching underfoot, children laughed on a playground, their parents watching with quiet pride. I stopped my breath, catching. My fund would matter to someone's father. Someone's sacrifice. It wasn't just revenge, it was redemption. Back home, the mailbox rattled. As I approached, I pulled out a single envelope. Emily's handwriting scrolled across it. My fingers traced the ink, but I didn't tear it open. The weight of her words felt distant, like a language I no longer spoke. I tucked it into my pocket, the house waiting its warmth, a promise of rest. I held Emily's letter, its edges soft under my fingers, but I didn't open it. Not yet. The walk to my house was quiet, the Columbus evening wrapping around me like a worn coat. The street lights flickered, casting pools of gold on the pavement, and I let my thoughts drift to the years I'd given, the pain I'd carried, the man I'd become. The letter was heavy, but my steps were light. At home I set the envelope on the table, the wood creaking as I leaned against it. The neighbor Tom had caught me earlier, his voice low with gossip. "Saw Emily and Trevor," he'd said, shaking his head. "Moved to a cramped place across town, no more fancy cars. Trevor's pushing papers at some office and Emily shut down. Her shop looked broken. Both of 'em." I'd nodded, my face blank, but inside the news settled like a stone. Justice, cold and final. I slid the letter open, the paper rustling. Emily's words spilled out, apologies, memories of me braiding her hair, promises to change. "I'm sorry, Dad, I didn't see you. Please, let's talk." Her handwriting trembled, but it didn't move me. I'd heard her laughter in that restaurant, felt the sting of her scorn. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer next to old photos and faded checks. That chapter was closed. The next morning I stood in a bright community center, the air warm, with the scent of coffee and new beginnings. My fund's first meeting buzzed around me. Dozens of faces, some weary, some hopeful. I stepped to the podium, my voice steady. "This is for the overlooked," I said, my eyes sweeping the room, for those who gave their all and were pushed aside. "We see you, we're here." The applause was soft at first, then roared, and I felt it in my chest. A purpose, a legacy. I left the center as dusk fell, the city alive with horns and laughter. The street stretched before me, lined with trees bare from winter's touch. I walked my hands in my pockets, a smile tugging at my lips. Emily and Trevor were out there, rebuilding or breaking, but their story no longer tangled with mine. Their future was their own to carry. The wind picked up cool against my face and I tilted my head to the sky. The stars were faint, but they were there steady above the city's glow. My steps echoed each one a note in a song I was finally writing for myself. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.